Hello, Nodes. Thanks for joining us for this week's Neo4j online meetup. Today, we will have a presentation on using Neo4j and GraphQL to build human connection. So we have with us, there's actually two presenters, but one of them is live and one of them is on the chat. He is having a hard time with the microphone, so we're going to have Robert here. But I'm Corinne Wallach. I'm the community manager at Neo4j. Mark, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Mark. I work on the developer relations team, so I'm here in London, ready to ask Robert any questions while he's presenting.
And Robert, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Robert. I'm a software developer. I like open source. And currently I'm working for Human Connection, which is a free and open source social network.
And also you can talk about Greg since he's on the chat but not able to join us.
Greg is also a software developer. And he is unfortunately not here with us for technical reasons. I think he's having problems with his computer. So I will probably just jump in and try to explain what he wants to explain. And yeah.
Okay, so before we get started, we are using Crowdcast. This is also streaming live to YouTube at the same time. But if you're interested in joining the live chat, most of it's going to be on Crowdcast. And then the link is in the YouTube live link if you want to just jump over to Crowdcast. It's pretty cool, actually. We like Crowdcast so far. We like it. And also, if you enjoy the presentation on YouTube, you can give it a thumbs up. That helps everyone else in the future be able to find the video. And one other thing, Nodes 2019. So the developer relations team at Neo4j and a couple other folks at Neo we're hosting a one-day Neo4j online developer expo and summit, Nodes 2019. It's going to be there's going to be a couple different technical tracks, all kinds of talks, everything from like kind of more hands-on types of workshop stuff to like use cases. It's going to be very, very technical stuff. It's going to be very cool. It's live streamed. It will be on Crowdcast, so you'll be able to chat. There's going to be all this interactive stuff. And we have other community events around it, like a big global graph hack and viewing parties and stuff like that. You can register on the Crowdcast. I'll also put a link for the Neo4j Online Developer Summit, the Nodes 2019. And our CFP is open. So if you want to submit a talk, you're welcome to do so. Yeah, I think we can get started, right, Mark? Am I missing anything? I always have to verify with Mark because I'm like, sometimes I'm...
No, we're good. We can start.
All of you do is, okay, Robert, why don't you take it away?
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. So now you should see my screen. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, so Neo4j, Human Connection. So Human Connection, as I said, free and open source social network. It's supposed to be a social network for active citizenship. So if you want to do the world a better place, then this software should give you some extra features for doing so. For example, I don't know, if you know something that like a particular action that could improve your environment, then you can talk about it and encourage others to do the same. Very straightforward. And if you're interested into the code, it's on GitHub. Human Connection is our organization, and you found the repository with the same name there. And so I'm now thinking of what Greg wants to tell us. So actually, it's good practice to put the links into the chat. No, Karen?
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely put the links in the chat. I can also add them to the YouTube description, so that way anything that you talk about will also be posted in there too.
All right.
And if people are watching after the live stream ends, they can also go to the YouTube description. There'll be a link there where they can go to the thread on the community site and ask the presenters questions directly. But you could definitely post them. I'll copy them over to the YouTube link.
Excellent. OK, so GitHub, check. And so what's the connection between the social network and Neo4j? Well, We're using Neo4j as part of our technology stack. And so I guess Greg wanted to tell us about how we migrated to Neo4j. Actually, Greg, if you want to interrupt me in anything, just write down something in the chat, and I hope Karen and Mark will keep an eye on it. And if you have some missing information, just chat it in, and someone hopefully make me notice. Okay.
Yeah, if people have questions in the chat, you can actually label it. There's where the text box where you can enter your question. Just mark it as a question, and it actually pumps up in your Ask a Question section, and people can actually vote on what questions they want answered first. So we could do it that way too. You can actually label your questions if it's aside from just regular chat.
Nice. Yeah, there was a slight connection drop, so sometimes maybe I'm breaking up. All right. So okay. So Neo4j, that's basically our technology stack. So it's a web application. We are having a single-page app, Vue.js in the front end, and we're using Nuxt.js also as the API between front-end and client. We use GraphQL, and on our backend we have Node.js. And finally, we have our database, which is Neo4j. And I think Greg wanted to explain that we once had another technology stack, which you can still find somewhere in here, which is also deployed and which is currently in use. But we had a couple of difficulties with it. I think it would be wise if I could just draw something, right? Does it help if I write the, oh no, that's something else. If I make like a chart of the technology stack?
You could do whatever you think would be valuable. And also people in the chat room, you could also kind of give your feedback too. But yeah, you can definitely draw something if you feel the urge to.
Yeah, I think that for me that helps. So we have our 3-tile web application, and before we had also Vue.js that didn't change, and we had REST as the programming interface. Can I make this another shape maybe? Okay, I think you get the point. And then we have Node again. It was actually a framework called Feathers. And finally, there was a MongoDB. And this setup had a couple of limitations, which we hope we can get rid of or can solve with Node.js. Neo4j, of course. So I think the biggest problem with that was that we had, with REST as our primary application interface, we had like many round trips between requests. And regarding the database, it was just not really possible to calculate counts, have relationships. I think doing relationships in MongoDB, since it's a document-oriented database based on a JSON, like the primary model behind MongoDB is a tree, whereas with Neo4j we have a graph. And if you develop a social network, which, well, a graph is also like a network, and so it's like a natural choice to use that. So I think we had like 2 major change motivations. Go away. No. And so now we are having GraphQL and just plain Node. So the backend code has very minimized. And finally, we have Neo4j. So left before, and on the right, we have the situation how it is right now. And it solves a lot of problems. Like we can access the data in one request, and GraphQL, you can request everything you need, including all the nested models through one request. And we don't have, for example, we persisted certain counts in the MongoDB because it was just so difficult to keep track of how many posts does a user have, how many comments does a post have, and so on and so on. And this is just not necessary anymore with Neo4j because we have just relationships and nodes, and that's it. Does it make sense? Can you give me some feedback, Karen, Mark? You're the only ones who can currently speak to me.
Well, we're the only ones who can physically speak to you, but
Yeah.
other people in the chat. If you guys have anything to say, somebody said, great to be in this session. And makes sense to me, makes sense. That's the feedback. You can see the chat, right?
All right. Yes, I can. Yes, and currently I'm looking at the chat. All right. So this is the situation how it was. And was it clear why we made the move? Like our biggest pain points with the old approach?
You can tell us.
Yeah, well, it was error prone, it was hard to maintain, and it didn't really scale. And the one reason what we thought is like that we have to make so many requests. Like you would, I don't know, get the first 10 posts. For each of those posts, you have to do n more requests to get the user, and so on and so on. And there can be just many things that can go wrong in the meantime. And second is the much simpler database scheme. If you're basically developing a network between users and the content that they deliver to the network, like posts and comments and so on, if you can just simply relate each node to another. I hope that makes sense. By the way, how is the knowledge about GraphQL in the audience?
I would assume it's that you can explain it from scratch. By the way, Greg also mentions that you fixed a lot of issues with modeling data and relationships. Maybe you can do a couple of sentences on that.
Performance scalability, and that's not Greg,
one
right?
above that. Yeah, two up.
Yeah. So yeah, having GraphQL and a graph database is actually a perfect match. I would agree. Like it would have been a lot of pain if we migrated to GraphQL first, keeping MongoDB, and then finally also migrating MongoDB because it was just not suiting our use case.
So you switched to both of them at the same time, basically.
Yes. We are still in the transition. Yeah, I should say that.
Okay.
So I pointed out the legacy deployed version, which is currently not maintained anymore. And then there's the new one. And this one, by the way, is publicly accessible. So you go to that URL, which I shared in the chat. And if you want to know what are the logins, then you can simply go to our GitHub page and find them there. It's very simple. You can just log in with user@example.org. Password is always 1234. That's fine, good enough for the staging environment. And since we are an open source network, we really also depend on all the feedback that the open source community gives us, right? So we always try to have something like a playground out there where our open source contributors can play with. So maybe this is what you currently see. It's all like nonsense data, lorem ipsum, and so on. But you can, for example, see exactly one request made to somewhere in here. Is it that one? No. That's where's the API? That's uploads. Okay, I'm a little bit lost right now, but the point is you have one single request made to get all that data. And there's this front end here, and it connects to the API, which you can also find here. If you want, you can also try it out and play around with it. For example, you can, I don't know, get all the posts. So this is like a GraphQL playground, which is given to us by the Apollo server, and you can, for example, get all the posts. Not too many are there right now. So this is it.
Wolfgang asks if you can show us the graph structure directly in Neo4j.
Yes, but I have to show it to you locally. So I hope I have Neo4j running on my machine. So there's no direct access to Neo4j, to the Neo4j that's, this one is working on. So I have this one here, and I can, for example, say match n, return n. For the seed data, this is okay. It's not too much data. All right, and we have, what is that? That's a category. So that's a tag. That's a post. So posts are very simple. I mean, you all know how a social network works. You have a user who's, oh no, he shouted that post. So who wrote the post? I think it was Peter Lustig. Yes, that's the author. Can I make this full screen? Yes. He wrote the post, and sometimes we have comments on the posts.
Might be good to have you zoom in a little bit too if you wanted to show certain areas, because the text can sometimes be small, a little grainy.
Can you repeat that one, please?
Yeah, it might be good to have you zoom in if you wanted to show something small, just because sometimes the screen is grainy, so it's hard to see.
Never zoomed in this. There.
Yeah.
Interesting. I found a new feature. Cool.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Karen.
And then
yeah,
Greg asked
so
if you
it
can
doesn't let
maybe
me
do,
zoom any
Greg
further.
asked if you can maybe do a more specific query too.
Yeah, maybe, come on.
I love how your colleagues are asking for like very specific things. They're like, hey, do this.
I like that. Like getting all the posts. What's wrong? Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, but that's not so interesting. I guess something like wrote and then user. There we go. It's a little bit less cluttered. Yeah, but so this is how basically how it looks like. Okay, and yeah, I think that's more or less what Greg would have told you, I hope. Like explaining how was the situation before, why we chosen Neo4j, and yeah, we've chosen Neo4j. We wanted a graph database, and Neo4j happens to be the most popular one, so we chose Neo4j. Yeah, so I hope everyone has a rough understanding how the technology stacks look like. Do you?
Yeah, we got a question for you. From
yes. Which one? This one here?
Yeah, you can see it on the bottom. So I've watched some interviews with Dennis Hack, and wanted to ask if you considered, have you looked at Mastodon before you started working on Human Connection? Yeah, I guess maybe you can just talk about that.
Yeah, that's like a perfect transition. So dear Tungdil, thank you very much for that. So what is Mastodon? Of course, I know Mastodon. I'm also having a user account. Mastodon is also a social network. It's very similar to Twitter. You have tweets, like it's a short blogging social network. And the good part about Mastodon is that Mastodon uses open standards to connect with other social networks. So if you search for GitHub and you go to the GitHub page, then you see it's basically also telling you free and open source social network based on ActivityPub. Does anyone know what ActivityPub is? Or does anyone have heard about the so-called Fediverse? Nope.
I think you can probably explain it.
So the ActivityPub is a W3C specification, and it's a specification how federated social networks should communicate. So it's a communication protocol, and the good part about it is that you have decentral social networks, so you can have many instances which can all talk to each other, and even better, these social networks can have a totally different software stack. As long as they speak ActivityPub, they can connect to each other. What does a connect to each other mean? You can write a post on, I don't know, Mastodon, and then you can see it on Friendica, for example, and vice versa. So that's amazing. Like it's against those walled gardens that Facebook and Twitter is imprisoning in their users. Right, they're trying to keep their users in there and So this one, it basically should not matter which application you choose. If they speak ActivityPub, they can all talk to each other. So this is like the so-called Fediverse, and like it's the group of all social networks that have some sort of federated communication protocol. So there's not only Mastodon. Mastodon is a really huge one. There's also Friendica, that's macroblogging, and there's PeerTube, which is like an alternative to YouTube. And basically, you can interconnect all of them. And we're going into the exact same direction. All right. So human connection should also become one of those. Like it should find a nice spot maybe here, and you should be able to host many instances of human connection, which can all talk to each other. You can have many instances running on servers in different countries. And also you should be able to connect with Mastodon, see Mastodon posts on human connection, and vice versa. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I guess we can ask Tung Dill if that answered the question. But I guess, yeah, for now we can just continue with whatever you were going to present next.
Yeah. So what I'm going to present, that's now my responsibility, because I was working with Neo4j and also the integration of Neo4j in our backend for a while. And I would like to talk about things that are awesome, but also things that might be improved. And the first thing, there's actually two things I want to talk about: how we deploy Neo4j, and what does that mean in this context here, like the Fediverse, because writing a software that you just publish to the world and let other people host an instance of it means you have no control how people deploy it, right? And the other thing that I want to talk about is this framework called Neo4j. I hope we'll get to it in a couple of minutes, which is an amazing NPM package. And I don't know, does William Leon, I think that's his GitHub name, is among our viewers?
You're giving him, it's just Will Lyon, but it does sound much nicer when you call him Leon.
Oh,
he's on the chat as well. So
nice. Yeah, so he's, I think, the core maintainer of this package, and yeah, I will talk about that also. Yeah, so what we do to deploy human connection is we use Kubernetes. And now I would be interested in Karen, Mark. Can you tell me, do you know anything about the deployments of Neo4j for your customers? Do you have customers who deploy with Kubernetes? And yeah, first of all, how did you know anything about it?
Yeah, I mean, people do a mix of things. Some people use Kubernetes, some people just deploy it directly, some people use it via Docker, some people obviously do Docker in Kubernetes, all sorts of things. Some people put it on the cloud, some people put it on-prem. There's no like one thing that you could say everybody does. Oh.
Yeah, and do you know if those people who deploy on Kubernetes also have the Enterprise Edition, all of them?
Yeah. If you want to do a cluster, which I guess would be most of the users who are putting it in Kubernetes, then you'd want to be using that. Yeah.
Yeah, because our problem now is we could just simply get a license to have the Enterprise Edition, and we need that because we want to do online backups. So Neo4j has features for backing up the data. Unfortunately, the online backup, which means you don't have to turn down, you don't have to shut down the database in order to do backup, is an enterprise feature. And that really created some pain points for us, because we cannot by all means use any feature of the Enterprise Edition, because that would mean we would have to request all our friends who want to host human connection to also get an Enterprise Edition license. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah.
And yeah, so that's something that I'm actually pretty interested in. So if you want to know how we deploy our application, so this is, for example, the current the Kubernetes cluster for this instance here. No, not this one. This one, Nitro-staging. And I don't know what's going on now. I have to re-log in, no problem. So I get my token from there. And we have our namespace, human connection. And this is how it looks. Like we have these 3 deployments that I talked about, like front end, back end, database. And if we, for example, have to make it backup, then we cannot simply shut down the database, because since it's the command that's run by the Docker image, that would mean shutting down the entire container. Like the pod will be terminated if we would change the command. So what I have to do is I go into our deployment. So Kubernetes has deployments also as part of the code. And then I just override the command and I say tail, which does nothing, literally nothing, and apply it in order to make the backup. So I say kubectl apply f human, come on. And this will now create a downtime, which is a little bit unfortunate. So what you can see here now is, yeah, so we have a multi-attach R. That's because DigitalOcean doesn't allow more than 1 pod to access a persisted volume, right? So the database has to store the data somewhere, and this data obviously needs to be persisted and should not be wiped out once you deploy a new pod. And so we have only 1 pod that can access the data at a time. And if we change something with the Neo4j deployment, then we get this strange error, and we have to wait for Kubernetes to create a new pod. Well, release the old persistent volume and then create the new pod. I hope this doesn't take too long. And then finally, we can get into the pod. This is still open. Yeah, now it's green. So now I'm here, and as you can see, there's no database running anymore. This is the command that I changed. And finally, I can say Neo4j admin dump, and then to some kind of location, which just doesn't get deleted just like that once I change the deployment and terminate the pod, right? And this is really this took us a while to figure out. And I would really love to get your feedback, the feedback of the audience, if anyone has this problem. If Karen, Marek, if you know something about your customers using Kubernetes in this kind of environment. And now I have the dump, and this is how I would do it manually. And I spent quite a while to figure out how to do backups with Kubernetes. And you can see my latest efforts in the documentation. So I can share that link. So this is our documentation. If you check out our documentation, you can go to Kubernetes deployment and then to volumes, and then you see what I was just explaining. All right.
There are 2 questions too.
Yeah.
So the 2 questions. One, somebody asked, and I don't know if you would want to answer this, or maybe Will would want to answer this in the chat. So is there something similar for Neo4j, GraphQL, Python?
What does he or she mean by something similar?
This is Prince Paul.
Similar to the Neo4j GraphQL JS library. So at the moment there are 2 libraries. There's one which you're using, which transpiles for JavaScript applications, and there's another one which does it for Java. At the moment, I don't think there's one that does Python.
Yeah, not yet for Python, Will said. The next question is, do you plan on extending the features of Neo4j GraphQL JS, such as Cipher directive, to a Python implementation of GraphQL, such as Graphene?
Oh, yes. We're definitely planning to contribute to that library. By the way, I think Will has also answered the first question, not yet for Python.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the second one is more for Will as well, I guess.
Yeah, I was like, we could invite Will on screen maybe at the end to ask some specific GraphQL questions.
Yeah, I'm not sure how good his video stream is. I can try.
Yeah. All right. So let's finish up that for a moment. The reason why I was showing you this is like, I don't think that our setup, like developing an application which has Neo4j as the database and not being able to, like, I don't know, maybe you have more companies as customers, not so many non-profits as we are. Like this setting that you have no control over how people want to deploy this application, and you cannot ask them to get the enterprise editions. I thought it's so common maybe that that it would be maybe wise or like a good thing to do if you could maybe add the online backups as part of the community edition, maybe. Like, is this something that I could simply like ask for here?
I think this is well above the pay grade of either of us, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, like for open source projects and for startups, we have people using the enterprise version for free for those type of projects. So maybe that it can fall under that type of thing. But I don't know. I wouldn't be the one who knows the answer to the question.
Yeah. I mean, we basically want everyone to just grab the code, just as you would do with, for example, Mastodon, and just run your own instance. And yeah, it would complicate things really if every one of those had to apply for the enterprise edition, and otherwise you cannot do like backups without having downtime and so on. Anyways, yeah, so that was one of those things. Maybe you can give this as a feedback. I don't know if people who are developing in Neo4j with these videos. Yeah, it's just something that would be really, really nice. And I think it's something sensible to have at least the backup features for everyone to use. Because what my experience with backups is if they tend to be difficult or inconvenient, then people just don't do them. Which is a shame, because it's actually really important to have, if you have an instance with, I don't know how many thousands of users, I don't know how many users Mastodon Social has, probably a couple of, yeah, maybe 1 million, I don't know, then it would be pretty sad if you just lose that data and you don't have proper backup in place. All right. Any more questions so far? No.
No, I think you answered all of them for now. Greg, in his chat-driven talk, suggests that you should show some code of the resolvers and middleware.
Oh yeah.
Show some code.
Yeah. So let's go to this particular thing here. So our backend is based on Neo4j GraphQL JS quite heavily. I think, as far as I'm concerned, it is part of like an entire distribution which is called Grand Stack, of which we only use this package here because we're not using React, and we basically just use that library in order to get the resolvers generated. And what I really like, it's an amazing package, and it helps you a lot, especially if you start from scratch. So what this thing does is you can augment your GraphQL schema. So maybe I missed that one, but I missed that one to explain. You have the GraphQL schema. So the entire API is based on a schema. Like that's an agreement between the client and the server. So the client always, so it will always know title will be a string, for example, because that's what the schema says. And you can actually check out the schema if you have this playground and you click on, well, this thing here, then you get the schema, And this is like the entire generated schema after you applied Neo4j GraphQL JS, right? We didn't add all those attributes. It's quite a lot. Everything that starts with an underscore is generated. And yeah, so you basically, you have this GraphQL schema, and you can feed that to a method called makeAugmented and then the magic happens. And Neo4j GraphQL JS does some nice assumptions, and it just gives you some resolvers if you haven't implemented them yourself. So if I go to the code and go to the backend, and I don't know, I think we have the schema somewhere here. Type, okay. So this is what we wrote ourselves. We have the post, and we have a couple of attributes on them, like an ID. And this, by the way, this would be the ID for ActivityPub. So we're like intent on implementing ActivityPub. Yeah, and then you have an auth can have Cypher directives, and this here a message to Neo4j post has a user. The relation should go from the user to the post, and it should have the type wrote. Right? The library knows about it. And then the magic happens. So each of those directives will have an effect, and then you get something like can I search for? Just download it. Schema 4 downloads schema. Type post. Yeah. So after you have seen how the post looked like before, and then suddenly you have all of that, right? Everything which starts with an underscore is also generated by this library. So part one is to augment the schema. Just add a reason about the types that are already there. Use directives to make to understand the schema even more. All right, does it make sense so far? Hello, hello. Am I alone?
Yeah, I think you can maybe you can explain it in a little bit more detail. Maybe just pick one of them and explain how the transpiling process works for anybody who's not familiar with it. So say, if you go back to I think the other view was a little bit easier to see where you had. Yeah. So say okay, do the post. So what happens when you do that? So what happens when you do that post title? What does it do? Maybe to start with.
This one? You mean that? Or how this schema gets augmented?
No, yeah, just explain like the mapping from the GraphQL schema to the Neo4j schema. And I guess we've actually got a question from Bob along those lines about the GraphQL schema and the Neo one. Like which one did you come up with first? Did you do the GraphQL one and then that generated the Neo4j one, or did you have the Neo4j one first and then you mapped the GraphQL one on top, or what was your process for working with the two technologies?
We did it at the same time. So actually, Greg was was the person who chose both of those libraries, both of those technologies, Neo4j as a database plus this particular integration. And he was also the first one who really discovered it. And yeah, but what happens, for example, if you have a type post, then you get one top-level query and a couple of so-called mutations. So a query is what you can see here. Give me all the posts, and the query will have the same name as the type that you have defined. Okay, so yeah, so this is a query, and this means like you can from the outside. There's the two magic query groups, I would say, or the two magic types: query and Mutation, and a query will always request some data from the backend, and the Mutation is able to change data, right? Do the CRUD operations except the R, which stands for read, so creating things, updating things, deleting things. And so you have a naming convention here that gives you a mutation to create.
At the moment, your screen is on the I think, at least for me, maybe Karim, you can confirm, it's on the page where you list all the mutations.
Oh,
but
no.
It sounds like you're referring to some other screen when you're talking.
Yeah, shall I restart the screen sharing again?
Yeah, maybe we can quickly try that.
I'm a little bit afraid.
Okay. While you're doing that, Greg comments that the GraphQL schema came first, and the library which augments the mutations, I guess, came after it. So that's cool. Okay, yeah, I guess that's the proper GraphQL way to do it.
I have no idea how I can turn off the screen sharing, honestly. I cannot see any button now. I could see it on the last screen, but no, not again.
If you hover,
can someone confirm that you can actually not see my screen? Or like the screen's frozen?
Can you hear me? If you hover over your video.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Hello, hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello? I cannot hear anybody.
Oh, that's we're here.
What about now?
Ah, all right. So
okay.
Now I heard Mark saying something. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you see my screen? Can you see the inception?
Yeah, but it's still on the it like has add user followed by payload, add user following payload.
Yeah. I will click on close video, and I hope this doesn't close the the meeting, just the screen sharing.
Yeah, if he stops screen sharing and then.
Aha. And now I can share the screen again.
Let's try again.
All right. Can you see my screen now? Can you see the graphical?
There we go.
programs?
Yeah, I think that's where you were intending to be. Cool.
Oh, okay. So what I'm going to try to explain.
So the bit where we were frozen was from the point at which you were explaining the difference between the query and the mutations.
Yes. So query and mutations are basically your entry into the GraphQL server, and yeah, so a query will read data from the server, and with mutations you can change data. And so when you have the type post, what this library does, it gives you a top-level query, which is called post, just as the type name, and will give you a couple of another mutations. So you have, for example, create post, or you have update post, and based on the name, you can delete. You can guess what they all do, and there's delete post, right? And then you give it some, for example, an ID. That's the only thing that's required here. You can just delete the post, and then that's gone. And how is it implemented? The schema. So the schema is just a declaration of things, right? It's not the definition. It's just declaring, okay, we have these and that the types, and we have these queries and mutations, and they have to get implemented somehow. And that's also what the library does for you. So if you don't implement any resolvers, then you get resolvers for free, like it's a query builder. And yeah, so it's just assuming that if you delete I don't know, a post, then you want to delete a node with a label post. So types are mapped into the Neo4j database with labels and with a particular ID. If I start my backend now, I can also add debug true. This will give me the exact Cypher query. So I'm running the backend here on the left side of the terminal, and I don't know what this is, but interesting. Web app is currently broken. Let's transpile the code again. So this is my front end. I can nevertheless check out the backend with no problems, which is running on localhost 4000 in my case. So here's my playground, which is currently on my machine. And if I do, for example, that, then I get some response. And if I check the terminal, then you can see what this library has done for me. Okay, so this is like the Cypher query that will produce the data that will later be returned to the client. And here is everything, all the params that, for example, replace this variable definition here. So deleted false, so deleted false. So this false will go in here. Does it make sense?
Yep. So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So
yes.
were you able, like, did you find that you were able to start building your, did you have to learn Cypher at all to get started, like building this application, or were you able to just purely use the library and use the GraphQL JS library to get started?
I have never worked with graph databases before, so this application was the first example where I had to use it. And I think in order to use this library, you have to know Cypher. You have to learn it at least.
Okay.
So I didn't know it. I didn't know it either. But in order to debug things and in order to use it, you have to really understand how the library works. It's simply not sufficient to just use it and that's it. And that's the point here. Let's say you want to customize. That's our current biggest problem with this library. It's amazing. It's especially amazing if you start from scratch and you're just like, you want something that's just working, right? You just define your schema and basically this is it. And then you get the resolvers for free, and then you have posts that you can create and update and things, and everything is awesome. And you can also nest things. So what you can see here is even the nesting works. So a post has many comments. So I'll show you that. Type post. Oh no. Let's first query. Okay, there's the top level query, and this should be somewhere the post. So this is the query for the post. And of course, the post query will return an array of posts. And since the schema knows that the type post, so each of them has relationships, like the directives are not part of the GraphQL spec. That's from Neo4j GraphQL JS. But here you can see we have related contributions, for example, or tags, or comments, like lower letters comments, and this will also give us an array of comments. So that's why we are able to just write comments and then hit control space, which is autocomplete, and we can, for example, get the content of the comments for each of them, and we can get the author of the comments, and from the author we can take the name, and so on and so on. So what's wrong here? Aha, just one curly brace. So, and that's giving us this query here. Oh, and this is just nice. It just works. This is just amazing. So even a complex query like this, Neo4j GraphQL JS is able to handle that. All good so far?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess maybe you can explain a little bit more. So like what you've showed so far, like in here, it doesn't, like, you were able to query this data, and at the moment you haven't had to write any Cypher yourself. So maybe you can explain a little bit more, like what would you say, like if somebody was coming to this new and they have also not done anything with graph databases, like what's the where did you find, okay, I've reached the limitation of what I can do just by using this library as a black box, and okay, now I want to understand what's actually happening inside the box, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it looks like a black box, but you have to understand how the black box works in order to use it. So not so black the box. Basically you want to do this. You want to understand, okay, what's being generated. Like what is it's actually very similar to an R mapper in relational databases. So here you have graph mapper or something, and you need to know what's actually the result of the cipher statement, because the problems will happen as soon as you want to customize it. Like this library improved nothing approach. Once you want to do extra things, for example, if you create the post and you want to automatically assign the currently authenticated user to the post, this is how we do it right now. And it's like a little bit clumsy. So there is Neo4j GraphQL, yeah, just that name of the method, which comes from this library up here, okay? And this is doing the magic. Like every missing resolver basically has just this method here. And if you just want to have the default, you could do something like create post Neo4j. Well, Neo4j GraphQL, that's it, right? So this would be the default. And if you want to customize it and do something else, for example, here we are doing some kind of file upload. Then you first have to upload the files, then get the params from that, and then paste them params in there. So this method can pick it up and add the attributes. But sometimes this doesn't work. For example, if you want to assign the author, and this is how we do it. So we first create the post, and once we have it, so result here is like the response of the database, which will be a post, because we are in create post. It will always create a post, or it will crash. And then we make our own cipher statements, right? So result ID, this is the post ID here. And so we're trying to match a post with this particular ID. And we have our user ID, which comes from the context. So context is like, that's where we have the authenticated user, the user that's doing the request. And we have the user ID. So we are matching those two nodes. And then once we have them, we merge them and we create this word relationships between them. I think I've seen something which where someone on the internet explained how one could do this directly in the schema. But honestly, I think that's not the best thing you can do. Like I've seen something. This library allows that you can. No, wrong folder. This library allows that you can. There you have a cipher directive called, I think it's just called cipher. Cipher, there we go. And then you have cipher statement directly, right? So the comments count is just that. So we are matching comments, and then you have some magic variables like this. And then something happens, and then finally you have a return count, and the count just the number of nodes. And then that's how the comments count for the post is implemented, right? And I've seen examples on the internet where people use also that to override the mutations. But for me, I think that's just doesn't feel right. Like I want to have the schema to be the declaration of things, and I want to implement the resolvers myself. And that's where the troubles rise. Because as soon as you want to customize something, then you're basically on your own. This method here, I already contributed to that library, is distinguishing basically if it's a query or a mutation, and then it's calling. It's basically just dispatching. Am I a cipher query or am I a cipher mutation? Then it's calling the right method here, right? So what we also could do is to use cipher query, because cipher query will give us a string, and this string here is the generated cipher query. All right. So I thought in the beginning, all right, cool. I don't want to immediately run this whole thing. Like don't issue the database call. Just give me some layout or something, and then it can patch my stuff into it, right? And generate a complex cipher query or a complex cipher statement from a base cipher statement. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, I think so. So far, so good.
And that's just not possible, because unfortunately the implementation of this is it's giving you a string. And if you want to change anything with the cipher statement, then you would have to do string manipulation, which is really not the best thing to do, right? It's super hacky, and you probably don't want to do that. And also, once people update this library, then it will probably break. So we thought maybe it's safer to first have multiple database calls. I don't know if they are atomic. I guess not. I don't know what happens if this succeeds and this fails, then we have a post which is an orphan post or something. Yeah, but it's we would love to have to get some customization in this method, like telling, okay, we want to have this condition there, and maybe also create a relationship there, and all of that. And this method, which the Neo4j GraphQL, which you can find, by the way, here. This is the method that is used. It's basically just dispatching based on the resolve info object. It's dispatching whether to call Cypher query or Cypher mutation, and then running it, the Cypher statement immediately. You cannot just customize it just like that, because it's all string based. All right? Does it make sense? Shall we have a look into the code here, or are we going
I think we're good, but
down the rabbit hole?
Yeah, we probably don't want to go down the rabbit hole because we're already sort of approaching an hour. We probably. But yeah, that's interesting. So basically there are some areas where you would like to be able to extend or complement what you can do with the library with your own custom code. And at the moment, you have to do more work than you would like to do, basically.
Exactly.
I mean, that's okay. I mean, I think it's still useful to. I guess with libraries like this, you never really can see where do people want to extend it until they try to extend it. So I guess over time it will start to handle those things better. We got a question for you from Adam, which is if you had to estimate how much time would you say that using GraphQL has using the GraphQL JS library that Will maintains, rather than if you had to write these resolvers all from scratch yourself?
Wow, that's a really tough question. So I guess Adam
that's how we roll here.
I think Adam wants to write his own application. So Adam, if you start from the scratch, use GraphQL right away, right? And GraphQL is great. GraphQL itself is great. Like having the schema and being able to have this sort of agreement, and also the client being able to tell what's coming out from the API, and you don't have to issue multiple requests and also wait for them, right? So it's really good for performance. It's easier to maintain. So GraphQL, yes, certainly better. If you're doing something like that, I think if you have, especially for clients, since we were talking about ActivityPub, maybe you also want to have an API for other servers. I don't think if you communicate with other servers that REST will be that problematic. But if you have client and server, like you have a rich client like this, and you want to do very special things, like give me all the posts with all the authors and all their followers and posts and comments and the badges, right? If you want to do complex things like that, with REST alone, it would be just a lot of requests. And you will run into this N+1 problem. And no. So GraphQL, yes. However, it's currently not currently well laid out with the Neo4j integration. Sorry. Does it answer the question, Adam?
I mean, I think so. We have to let Adam. Adam is the real authority on whether that was what he was after. But we can wait for him to reply. If anybody else, I guess we're going to wrap up in a minute. But if anybody else has any other questions that you'd like Robert to answer, now is your chance to answer them. Robert, I guess it'd be interesting maybe to wrap up. I think what would be interesting to tell people is what are your next things that you're planning to do with GraphQL and Neo4j and indeed with Human Connection, like maybe next features or other things that you're planning to do.
Yeah. So interesting for you would be certainly that I'm very willing to contribute to this particular library, because it needs some maintenance, and I would love to contribute to it. I just want to to encourage other people also to contribute to this, because I think it's just the right idea. We just have to refactor it. Like my idea was maybe to not a string that you output to the developer, like here. Well, that's running this the database call, but you get what I mean. And instead have some kind of abstraction. I was working. I was a Rails integrator. It's super feature rich. You do a lot of things with it, and I would nowadays use Rails even just for that, right? Because the active record is so great. And something like that is still missing for Neo4j GraphQL JS. And I think it has a really nice feature set so far, but how we want to use it is really just as a baseline, and then we want to customize it really heavily. And so I'm asking all of you to check it out, this library, and also contribute to it. And I would certainly be willing to also spend a small share of my working time just for this library, because our backend so heavily depends on it, and like not using it would not be an option anymore for us. And it's just so common that we have to customize it, and we have to change and look the thing there. And every time we want to make a new feature, it's always like being lucky that it's possible with the library. Because sometimes you want to change some little like tiny things, and no, it's not. That's not like that. And then things get dirty. And being able just to customize it would be so great. And I think it is certainly going to the right direction. We absolutely need it. I also like that it's taking the GraphQL schema as something like the single source of truth, which I would say is a very reasonable approach. Yeah, so please, everyone, contribute to that library. Also, I don't know how the environment of the Neo4j core team is, but I don't know if they contribute to these libraries, but it would be of great value, because if there are good integrations for Neo4j, I think many more customers will start to use Neo4j, because you don't have to write Cypher yourself anymore. That would be a huge boost to the entire ecosystem, I would say. So
yeah, this library is maintained by the Neo4j Labs team, which is basically our developer relations team. And I'm sure, yeah, if you want to, I guess you've already collaborated a little bit with Will to add some stuff to the library. But yeah, I'm sure he would be very happy to work with anybody who wants to add new things to the library. I'll share our DevRel email. If you want to add something and you want to check with Will that you're not going off on some tangent away from what he's planning to do next, just send an email there and address it to Will, and then he'll find it.
Nice. Yeah. Great. Cool.
Yeah, and Will's on the chat and saying, yeah, thanks to everybody who's already contributed stuff, I guess, including you, Robert, and Greg as well. Unless we have any other questions, Karina, I guess we maybe can wrap up in a minute.
Okay. Yeah, does anybody else have any other questions? No? So I think we're good. If anybody's watching the live stream, watching the video
on my screen for Karen, it says the stream was unable to connect due to a network error.
Oh, can you hear
Mark,
me?
is she still with us?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I cannot see nor hear her.
Okay.
Matt can hear both of you.
I can hear both of you.
I cannot hear Karen. She was very silent for the entire talk, and I was thinking like maybe she's just maybe shy or something. I don't know, and maybe that's the reason why.
Karina is definitely shy.
I can make a screenshot and see and tell you what I'm currently seeing. So she's just not there.
You just let him know that I'm here. It's all good.
Hey, Karina is there, but yeah, I guess it must be some sort of streaming issue. But anyway.
Sorry for Karen. Maybe you have asked something and it just never answered that.
He was ignoring me this whole time.
Sorry for that. Impolite.
So this means I could say interesting
things.
She's
just not there. Does it help if I reconnect?
I mean, I don't think you need to worry about it. We're just wrapping up. She's just doing like a closing chat. There's no questions for you to answer yet. I'll tell you if there are.
Tell them that everyone said thank you. How about you do
also
the
interrupting
Mark?
her all the time.
Yeah, basically.
I will shut my mouth now.
Anyway, basically, there is a much thanks to Robert. And I guess, thanks to everybody for joining us this week. Next week, same time, we've got a rescheduled talk with Stefan, who's going to be talking about how to do to model provenance data in Neo4j. I'm just trying to get you the link in case you want to register and be really organized for that one.
Like if they're subscribed to us for other things in the future.
Okay. Yeah. So you can, or you can subscribe and find it on there, but it's also on the chat as well. And I guess with that, we'll say thanks to Robert and thanks to Greg for your remote control presenting from the chat as well. And thanks to everybody for coming to watch. And I guess we'll see you at another one of these.
All right, thanks.
Great, it was a pleasure.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.